Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something huge, a massive strategy shaping the future of Europe, the twin transition. That's right. This is Europe's multi-trillion euro bet on a future that's both a digital powerhouse and climate neutral. Now, the promise is absolutely enormous, but as the first waves of data are coming in, a much more complex and frankly fascinating picture is starting to emerge. So here's our roadmap. We'll start with the big promise of this transition. But the real story kicks in when we stumble upon a really unexpected puzzle in the data, a finding that honestly seems to defy all logic. And solving that puzzle, it reveals this surprising U-shaped pattern that leads us straight to the core diagnosis, something called the middle income trap. Once we understand that, we can chart a much smarter, more tailored path forward. All right, let's jump in.
Okay, so what exactly is this twin transition we're talking about? Well, at its heart, it's the EU's core strategic vision, and it's built on two gigantic pillars. The Green Deal, which is all about achieving climate neutrality, and the Digital Compass, focused on creating a powerful and resilient digital economy.
And the key idea here, the real magic, is that these two goals are not supposed to be separate. The whole thinking is that digital innovation, we're talking AI, big data, the Internet of Things, should be the very engine that powers our green goals. It's a vision of synergy, one designed to lock in Europe's global competitiveness for decades to come. Now, these policies aren't just high-level ideas floating around Brussels. They get implemented on the ground in actual regions through strategies called smart specialization, or S3. And the goal is crystal clear. Use this targeted investment to supercharge labor productivity and kickstart economic growth across all 164 regions that were studied. Exactly. I mean, on paper, the logic is perfect. You invest in future-forward green and digital tech, you should see a nice, clean rise in productivity, right? But when the researchers actually crunched the numbers and looked at the aggregate data, the story took a very sharp and very unexpected turn. And that brings us to the million-dollar question. Or, in this case, the multi-trillion euro question. When you average it all out for the period between 2019 and 2022, did focusing on these goals actually deliver the goods? The first answer the data gave back was, well, it wasn't just surprising, it was genuinely concerning. Just take a look at this table. When all 164 regions were analyzed together, a bigger push on digital policies showed no real effect on productivity growth. Same thing for the combined twin policies. But here's the absolute shocker, that middle row. A stronger focus on green policies was actually linked with lower productivity growth. Whoa, hold on a second. That's completely backwards. I could maybe understand a neutral result. Maybe the benefits just take a bit longer to show up. But a negative and significant effect, that means the regions that were trying the hardest to go green were actually being penalized for it economically. That finding just blows up the entire premise of the strategy. There has to be something else going on, because an average number like this has to be hiding the real story. Exactly. That was the puzzle that just had to be solved. And you're right. Lumping everyone together, from industrial giants to rural areas, was masking a much more interesting reality. The key question isn't if the policies work, it's where they work and for whom. So the big breakthrough came when the researchers stopped looking at the average and did something much smarter. They split the 164 regions into 4 groups, or quartiles, based on their starting productivity level. So you have the least productive regions, the 2 groups in the middle, and the most productive at the top. And once they did that, a stunningly clear pattern just jumped right out of the data. And this, right here, changes the entire conversation. And here it is. This chart shows the impact of just the digital policies, and the pattern is unmistakable. Look at the far left. For the least productive regions, these policies are like rocket fuel, a massive boost to growth. This makes perfect sense, right? This is catch-up growth. They're closing basic digital gaps, getting businesses online, adopting technologies that already exist. It's the low-hanging fruit, and it pays off big time. But then look what happens. As you move into those middle productivity regions, the effect completely flips on its head and actually becomes a drag on their growth. And for the most advanced regions on the far right, the policy doesn't have a significant impact either way. They're already at the cutting edge. And this isn't a fluke. When we look at the combined twin transition policies, green and digital together, we see the exact same U-shaped relationship. It's a powerful engine for helping the laggards catch up, but it seems to actively hold back the regions that are stuck right there in the middle. Now, this is obviously not a random result. It's a consistent pattern that's pointing to a really fundamental economic dynamic. So the question is, What is it about being in the middle that makes these forward-looking investments backfire so badly? So that U-shape, it isn't just a statistical quirk. It's actually the signature of a well-known economic phenomenon, and it perfectly explains why those regions in the middle are struggling to get any return on these investments. It's called the middle income or middle productivity trap. You can think of it as being caught in economic no man's land. These regions are now too advanced to compete on low wages and basic production. They keep getting undercut by cheaper competitors. But, and this is the crucial part, they haven't yet built up the deep innovation ecosystems, the world-class research hubs, or the highly skilled workforce they need to compete with the global leaders at the technological frontier. They are, for all practical purposes, just plain stuck. So here's the critical difference. For those low productivity regions on the left side of the U, the twin transition policies work because they address foundational needs, things like building out broadband or helping small businesses adopt basic digital tools. It's about adopting what already works. But for the middle productivity regions on the right, just pouring money into a new green tech project doesn't fix the underlying problem. The policy basically hits a brick wall because of these deep structural bottlenecks. Things like slow-moving bureaucracy, a disconnect between university research and local business needs, or a workforce that just doesn't have the specialized skills to innovate with new tech. If you don't fix the foundation, the investment just fizzles out. And this brings us to the most important part of this whole analysis, the strategic takeaway. For every policymaker, for every business leader out there, this data sends a crystal clear message about how we have to think about regional development from now on. The evidence is just overwhelming. The whole idea of a generic, top-down, one-size-fits-all strategy is officially broken. It doesn't work, period. The only path forward that makes sense is a strategy that is intelligently tailored to where a specific region actually is on its development journey. This is what a true place-based policy is all about. And this slide basically lays out the new playbook. Step 1. Just acknowledge that these regional differences are real and have to be the starting point of any strategy. That leads directly to Step 2, place-based design. It means you craft policies to fix specific local problems, not just chase generic goals. Then, for those crucial middle regions, Step 3 is a big shift. The focus has to move from just funding projects to actually fixing the system, tackling those institutional problems and building a real durable capacity for innovation. And finally, for the advanced regions at the top, it's all about helping them push the frontier, supporting them in taking the risks that will ultimately pull the entire continent forward. And this way of thinking is already starting to shape the next wave of policy.
Yeah, and the good news is that policy is starting to catch up. The evolution from the older S3 framework to the new Smart Specialization for Sustainability, or S4, is a really promising step in exactly this direction. It's designed to be less of a simple checklist for funding and more of a real strategic tool that forces regions to think more deeply about sustainability and their unique local context. It's a move toward the kind of smart, tailored approach this research is calling for.
So we want to leave you with this final, critical question. It's not enough anymore to just have the words green and digital in your strategic plan. The real question for every leader is this: is your strategy honestly and rigorously tailored to your region's specific place on this curve? Because the data is very clear that getting that right is the difference between transformative growth and costly stagnation. Thank you for joining us for The Explainer.